desperate for hope that recovery from your eating disorder is possible? Do you feel afraid, ashamed, alone, or misunderstood? Or maybe you know someone struggling, but you don't know how to help. Friend, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Recover with God podcast, where you'll hear stories of recovery, personal and professional advice, and hope that only comes from God. You are not alone. You are understood. And God is here right now to walk this journey with you. Hey friend, welcome to another episode of the Recover with God podcast. Whatever brought you here today, I pray that this conversation will encourage you or make you feel less alone. You are in for a treat. I'm here with Eden, who is a registered dietitian nutritionist and owner of Pro Wellness. She works with clients across the spectrum of disordered eating to eating disorders with the ultimate goal of food freedom. What I appreciate about Eden is that behind her professional experience, she can also personally relate with her own story of recovery. But I'll let her share all of that. Hello, Eden. It's a joy to chat with you
Hi.
today. Hi.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, after hearing you speak on a different podcast, the Every Effort podcast, I'll give them a shout out. I knew I had to reach out. So thank you for saying yes.
Absolutely.
And as listeners, if this is your first time listening, I ask this question to everyone, but if not, you'll be used to this question. Zeal, it's one of my favorite words and so fun to say, but it also has a beautiful meaning. And I like to think of it as living with a passionate pursuit of a purpose. So, Eden, I'd love for you to tell me, what does living with zeal look like in your life right now?
Zeal is such a fun word. When I was reading into that, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. It could definitely be like a word of the year. So
Yep.
nice. I really like the word zeal. And I think I would say living with a purpose is just living in a joyful way and kind of looking at things through intention and thoughtfulness. Looking at true joy, not joy in the moment, not something that's going to make me temporarily happy, but true underlying joy in our soul, which I feel like we can just really have in our relationship with God. So it's kind of what came to mind for me with that definition.
I see zeal and joy going hand in hand in a lot of ways, and it really is a choice, just like joy is, to choose zeal and to choose that pursuit, and especially in my own life too. Yes, with God. So thank you for your thoughts on zeal. And so now I'd love to open it up for you to share your story, who you are, what you do, your recovery, all of that.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, my name is Eden Davis. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist, and I'm co-founder and co-owner of Per Wellness Practice, where we treat those with eating disorders, disordered eating, and as well as PCOS. So we offer both in-house nutrition through myself, and then we also offer in-house therapy through a licensed clinical professional counselor. So I got into Per Wellness Practice with my co-founder from meeting at a higher level of care. So we both worked in eating disorder treatment and really enjoyed collaborating together and just having that experience. I wanted to take it to the outpatient level. So it's kind of how Pearl came into existence. And I knew from an early age that I really wanted to get into nutrition and go to school for that. A few things there. So apart from my own recovery journey, my little sister was around the age of 10, I think, when my little sister was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And as a kid, that sounded so terrifying, like,
I
what,
bet.
yeah, what is this? I've never heard of it before. I didn't know anything about nutrition or how the body worked. So that definitely caught our family off guard, and it was a learning experience. So from an early age, I really got to see nutrition play such a powerful and impactful role firsthand, and I loved it. I loved seeing how, okay, this can be helpful with nutrition, and if your blood sugar goes low, we should do this. If it goes high, we'll do this. And having that perspective without those restrictive lens or that diet culture was really powerful. And I thought, oh, you know what? I really want to go to school for this. I really want to learn more about it. I didn't know what a dietitian was, but I was like, whatever this is, I want to pursue it. So that was one of the main reasons that I came to the work that I do today with nutrition. And then apart from that, of course, is my own recovery and just being touched by that and um, just wanting to make a difference in other people's lives. So, kind of the story on my own recovery is growing up, I did have a challenging time, a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of things in the home that were just honestly broken. So, growing up, things were extremely challenging. And then when I got to middle school, I was in like sixth grade when the eating disorder really presented itself. And it just felt like an escape. It felt like everything in my life was so chaotic. Everything was completely out of control, and I couldn't do anything about it. But when it came to food, when it came to, what I was going to put in my body and how I was going to, participate in movement and all these behaviors, I had this false sense of reality where I was like, oh, I can control that. I can't control what happens at home. I can't control these situations. I can't control these environments, but I can control this around food and body. So a lot of playing into that, which really manifested the eating disorder. And then it got to a point over the years where I was, just passing out at school. Eventually, the principal called my mom and was like, "Hey, we can't find your kid." So they had to come and look for me at school. Um, and all my friends like snitched on me, to my mom. Great friends, right? Like looking
Of
back,
course. Yeah.
wonderful friends, very thankful for that. But eventually my mom kind of figured out like, okay, something's going on. And that's kind of what I told her. I was like, I didn't even know it was an eating disorder. It was just like, I don't know, this feels good to me. Like I'm
Uh,
doing this, it's helping me cope. I don't know how to explain it. And my mom was definitely confused. She had never experienced eating disorders before. It was her first, kind of encounter with it. And she was like, I don't know what any of this means, but I want to help, like I'm terrified too, but let me help you. And I was like, okay, like sure. So she said, can we get you a therapist? Like, are you open to going to therapy? I'd never been in my life. And I was like, yeah, with everything going on at home, I think this could be a really good idea and could help me.
yeah.
Mom, with great intentions, finds a therapist online. Unfortunately, this therapist did not specialize in eating disorders. It was just your, average therapist, which shout out to average therapists. They're amazing who, I don't want to say average, who do general, mental health and wellness. They're
Sure.
fantastic. But when it comes to eating disorders, you have got to work with an eating disorder specialist. Um, so I go see this therapist, and this was a huge deal for me. I've never done anything like it. I've never talked to anyone about my eating disorder other than my mom, and that's only because the school called her. Like that was not my idea.
Right. Hmm.
So I go into this therapist office. I'm super shaky. I'm so nervous, and I'll never forget this encounter. She looks at me and she looks me up and down. I'm not living in a smaller body. And she goes, well, you clearly eat, so why don't you tell me the real reason that you're here?
Wow. Oh no.
And my my little heart as a kid just shattered that
Mm.
the fact that someone would speak to you like that when it took so much to even come, to a place to open up.
Yeah.
And to this day, I'm so proud of younger me because I just stood up and I was like, I will not be talked to like this. Like I am not
Good for you. Yeah. No,
I'm
instead of letting that project on how you should feel about yourself. Yeah.
right. Like I'm not going to sit here and be called a liar. Like I'm not
Yeah.
lying about what's going on in my life. So I told my mom, I was like, we got to go. She was just like, okay, neither of us really knew what to do about it. And, it's unfortunately still true to this day. I do feel like we've gotten better as a society, but especially then, we were so weight stigmatized, towards everything and malnourishment. We're like, oh, unless you're in a smaller body, like you're not malnourished, which
Yeah.
is so far from the truth. All bodies can be malnourished, but we refuse to see it then. So was never taken seriously. And then, my mom helped me the best she could through different situations. And eventually it kind of decreased and we didn't see it as heavily with the behaviors. So we were like, okay, maybe it went away, right?
Mm.
Doesn't
I
go away
hope.
without treatment.
Hmm.
So it's dormant for a few years. And then going into high school, as things in, the home got worse, so did the eating disorder.
Mm.
And, that's where we see the eating disorder a lot, is that when we feel our environments are out of control, that's where the eating disorder might really, start to come in, because it's that false sense of control. It's that coping skill in a way. So high school, came back full force, ended up in the hospital in a neck brace, and just not the best health outcome that I could be in. And still, even in the hospital, like, I'm on a breathing machine, I'm in and out of it, and I can hear, doctors and everyone in the hallways talking and being like, I know she's saying, like, she doesn't eat, but she's not in a smaller body, and there's still this question of, can it be an eating disorder when I'm literally in a neck brace, like, not breathing on my own, and my lab values are all over the place. Like, and it's just, it's so unfortunate. And then eventually they were like, yeah, we think your daughter has an eating disorder. So discharged from the hospital. Unfortunately, it went further downhill from there. This time, though, my body did change. So my weight fluctuated pretty intensely. I was underweight for, my height and everything. And I ended up going to the doctor because I had like the flu. And that's when, they flagged me and they're like, oh my gosh, you are severely underweight. You're severely malnourished. You need to go to the hospital now. And I'm like, what's sad is that I actually don't feel as worse as I did when I was in the hospital and just wasn't in a smaller body, So that weight stigma can be so real and so, so challenging. And then thankfully, after that, I was able to seek treatment and recover fully from my eating disorder, which was such a wonderful, wonderful thing that I'm just so grateful to be here today and to walk alongside other people on their healing journey.
Yeah, it's amazing that you, not number one, recovered, and that you are choosing now to use your story to, for your career, for what you want to go into, and then to help other people. And your emphasis on the medical field and the lack of knowledge with eating disorders is very important. And I'm not in the medical field. I don't see that day to day, but I also do know that I'd seen doctors when I was struggling too, and they either don't recognize it, or
Right.
like you said, they think like it's all about weight and you only get flagged if you are underweight. And there were definitely times in my journey where, because I struggle with bulimia, where I was not underweight sometimes. Sometimes I was, sometimes I wasn't, like
Right.
you. And so the times that I wasn't, it was like everyone thought, "Oh, she's getting
Mhm.
healthier." And I was like, "Nope." Inside, I was definitely not healthier. I was probably binging a lot more then. So it's such a silent struggle, and I get it. If you're not observing someone day after day, you may not notice, but there's still things to look for and signs, and hopefully it will continue to get better when it comes to medical professionals, at least if they don't have that specialty or they don't recognize it, to just understand that maybe I should refer this person to someone who can help, who does specialize in that area, even if it's not me. So that's sounds like a very long journey, and I know any recovery does take patience and time, and so very thankful that you did get the help you needed eventually.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, in terms of your relationship with God, as you were struggling, I'm not sure, exactly at what point you developed a relationship with God, but did that impact your recovery in any way?
Yeah, I know when I was in the depth of my eating disorder, everyone presents differently with their eating disorder, right? Like,
Mhm.
some people have theirs silently, some people are loud. Like, I was angry and I was loud
Mm.
with my eating disorder. And I was mad at the world. I was mad at God. I was mad at everything. And it felt so chaotic. It felt so, out of control in so many ways. And when I hit the lowest of my eating disorder, it's when I just really saw that, this whole time I was turning away from God. I was getting away from him, and instead of relying on him, instead of asking for help, making prayer a huge center of my recovery along with treatment was so important. And seeing that this can be a story for a reason, my healing can be such a powerful story. And God didn't, give me this eating disorder or anything like that. So instead of being mad and having those emotions, being able to find hope and find peace in the middle of the storm.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of saying it. And knowing that you can go to God. And it is interesting to hear the different emotions that we can have toward God as well, because I know for me in my story, I experienced a lot of shame, which is why I didn't want to go to God. But that is a really great point to bring up of how sometimes it may not be shame, it may be anger toward God for your situation or for the struggle that you have, whether that is your eating disorder or your eating disorder and other outside
Mhm.
external factors that might be affecting you as well. So I think being able to go to God with all of your emotions, God wants you to go to him with your emotions.
Right.
I love the Psalms of David where he gives us such a beautiful example of going to God however he feels and not sugarcoating it, not going to God and saying, "Okay, God, I'm here and I'm gonna listen to you." He's just like, "This is how I feel, God, and I trust you. I trust you, but this is how I feel right now, and I don't know what to do about it." So if anyone's listening right now and you don't really know how to go to God with whatever your emotions are, he's gonna be there. He's gonna listen. He wants you to do that. So please, please do.
Such a good point. And
Mhm.
we don't have to rehearse it either, before
Mhm.
we go into prayer. I think that's something because I wanted to control,
Oh
everything in
yeah.
my life. And the depth of it, I would be like, oh, I'm going to control my prayer. I'm going to control, how these situations go. And at the same time, I was like trying to rehearse my prayer. It's like, that's not supposed to be. God wants you to come as you are. He already
Mhm.
knows your thoughts. He already knows what's on your heart. But you have to open that up, to dive deeper into that relationship. And I think that's just so beautiful too, is he just wants you to give that control. The whole time of the eating disorder, it's control, 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 but it's give it to God, give that control, give that trust and that understanding of the unknown to God.
Yep. I can definitely relate to the unknown. That was probably one of the scariest parts of well, the scariest parts for anyone of giving up control is that unknown. What is my life gonna look like when I don't have control over it? And God just is like, trust me, and his story and his way is really more beautiful and really not as scary. I think the scariest part, honestly, is the anticipation of doing something. I feel like, at least in my own life, is just I don't you're like on the edge, right? And you're like, I don't want to step forward. And once you do, a lot of times it isn't quite as bad as you anticipate. And so I always try to remind myself that of anything in life, just I know that the other side is not as bad as my brain is telling me it might be. So, oh yeah. And God,
Absolutely.
and it will look messy. Yeah, like you said, there's nothing about rehearsing it or, even playing it out in your mind of the way it might look. Just do it. It's gonna be messy. You're not doing it wrong if it's messy. That's just the way it is.
Exactly. It's going to be messy and it's going to be hard. Good work is hard. It's not
Yeah,
supposed to be easy. And I think it's something we always want. I mean, I always want the easy way, like I
me
don't
too.
sugarcoat it, so
Yeah.
understanding that it's going to take some grit. Absolutely. And
Mhm.
also kind of relying on God through body image struggles within the eating disorder. I know
Mm.
when I was in my restriction and gym phase, and I was like, I'm going to, I had very low self-esteem, very low self-worth. That was my biggest thing was self-worth. And I was like, well, I can transform, all these things about myself, and then people will, find me worthy. Then I'll be enough. And it was like, you're already enough. You are already worthy in God's eyes. And that in itself is beautiful. And, there's that scripture that I personally think it's twisted a lot where it says, the body is the temple. And we like to twist that and say, yes, so we should lose weight and do the XYZ. And it's like, no, 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 no. The body is a temple. The body is your home. Let's learn to accept and respect this temple. Let's learn to nourish it through addition, not restriction. Let's make sure we're getting all our nutrients. Let's make sure to respect it through mindful movement that feels good to the body and honors it, and kind of leaning into that scripture too was really powerful for me and seeing like, I don't need to earn my worth. I don't need to earn my value just because, others might not see that. God does. And I don't need to transform my body in order to earn that.
That's a powerful point too with that verse because you're right. It's taken out of context so often. I know I did in the past too, and I think that looking at your body as that temple to take care of. It's so interesting looking back to see that
Mhm.
the way we thought we were taking care of our body was hurting our body.
Right.
And not only hurting your body, but hurting your mind and your spirit and your soul, and then that in effect hurts your ability to live for God
Yeah.
because number one, you're so consumed by your appearance and your food and what people think of you that it takes away from that focus on God. It takes away from your focus on just enjoying life or going back to zeal and joy. Like those things don't go along with
Yeah.
having a restrictive life and thinking you're taking care of your body. Those are lies from the enemy.
Yeah. And just like we were talking earlier about like medical, fields and how we've got to stop judging health based on weight. It's just my favorite phrase is weight doesn't equal health. And like I love to scream it from the mountains, and I'll tell health professionals that, if they're showing some weight bias, I'm like, well, we know that weight doesn't equal health. There are actual behavioral changes to health. Weight's not a behavioral change. There are actual things we can do to better our health that aren't around weight, and right back to that, even in this, situation, it's still true. We look at that phrase, that Bible verse, and we're like, oh, well, we'll just lose weight and that'll be healthy. It's like, that's not health. What are true behavioral changes that we can implement to live a joyful life and even deepen our relationship with God? If we are battling an eating disorder or disordered eating or any mental health like that, it's so hard to get through the day. That's your every single thought. It is getting in the way of so much, and it makes everything else so challenging.
Does. It takes up a lot of mental energy and in addition to physical, and there's so many things that you limit yourself by doing that. And I think there are lies about that as well, where you think, well, if I'm in a smaller body or if I look a certain way or if people perceive me a certain way, that's going to open doors. That's going to make
Mm.
my life better somehow. And I know looking back, when I was at my smallest, I was at my most unhappy
Right.
me. I thought being smaller or reaching a certain goal with my body would make me happier, and instead it just made me obsess even more
Mhm.
over not losing what I thought I had, which wasn't even great. And and now, yeah, just the feeling of having a body that feels good and feels healthier and feels like I can lift lift heavier things. I can, going back to your story about fainting at school. I mean, there were definitely, if you're not eating, your body is going to react. It's going to give you signs of if you're fainting, you're definitely not you're not eating enough.
Yeah.
You should never get to that point, or even if you feel faint and you feel like, oh, I can't function. I can't walk down the stairs. I can't, you know, walk a mile outside, then
Mhm.
that's because of restriction. Then
Right.
that's definitely a problem. So we could go on and on and
Oh
on
yeah,
about
all day.
I think all the lies and all the reasons why people want to restrict and why people and as we're saying this, like you and I both been there. So all you listening, if you're there right now, it's not saying like, oh my gosh, you are so wrong. How could you be thinking this? It's like we've been there. We know how
Exactly.
easy it is to get to that point with thinking those thoughts and seeing what society's telling you and the lies and just want to get that message across that it's number one, it's sadly normal to think that way these days, but at the same time there is a different way. There is a better ending for your story of living in freedom. So I love that you're helping women do that, and I'd love for you to describe a little bit about how you do help women with your practice. I know you shared a little bit about that in the beginning, but if there's anything you'd like to expand upon in different programs or different ways that you're doing that.
Yeah. So with my own personal experience of eating disorders, I kind of went back to that initial reason of why I wanted to become a dietitian with my sister having type 1 diabetes and understanding more like what is medical nutrition. And when I recovered, working with my dietitian, I thought was just so empowering. They were really wonderful to just talk with and actually understand true nutrition. It wasn't, hey, calories, hey, this and that. It was like, hey, this is why this is nourishing. This is why this is powerful. And I was like, I don't know, why I haven't thought this way. And I want to do this. I want to do what you do. Like being able to help people see true nutrition. I mean, that is my passion. So I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's go to school. Let's fight diet culture and make a space for true nutrition. So I did my bachelor's degree in nutrition and dietetics. And then in order to become a registered dietitian nutritionist, you have to do a year-long internship. And it's really neat. You get to do different types of rotations. And I applied to a program specifically so I could pick my own rotations. And I got to specialize in eating disorders. I got to specialize in nutrition counseling, my clinical rotation, community nutrition. I also got to work with diabetes and all things related to insulin, which I love.
Mm.
So really enjoyed that. And then I was very, very fortunate when I finished my internship and did my board exam and everything, I was able to get into a treatment center right away. Sometimes that can be really challenging to get into. So I was like, yes, I was so thrilled when I was able to do that position. So I became the lead RD for a partial hospitalization program. So I did day shifts with clients and just fell in love with it. I got to do one-on-one sessions. I got to do group sessions. We did cooking together. And then we also did just nutrition education. Like, hey, this is actual science-based, research-backed nutrition. Loved it. And something I really wanted to do once Kira and I were like, okay, we really want to go into outpatient, was just make it even more unique and cater to that individual. When we're in group programming, everyone can have, something else going on in their life, and we don't get to really dig too deep into that. But when we're in outpatient, I think my favorite thing is that I meet that individual where they are, and everyone's journey looks different. And that's a beautiful thing. We're not supposed to have the same journeys.
Nope.
So people coming in, I say, oh, I'm in a dorm and I can't cook. And I don't cook. I don't do the meal plan because I'm scared to eat it. Can you help me? And we'll come up with like, okay, how do we make dorm meals within a certain amount of time? And, we just get creative, and we're virtual. So I'll be in my kitchen, they'll be in their dorm, and we're just like whipping something up together, and it's so fun. Or I have a lot of people who have a lot of anxiety about going to the grocery stores, and they're like, hey, I have no groceries in my house because I cannot go to the grocery store. And we'll start off doing online orders and then work on exposures. And, they'll put me in their headphones and they'll go to Trader Joe's or whatever. And I'm like, I know Trader Joe's like the back of my hand. So I'm like, okay, over here we have. We'll do.
Your own personal shopper, yeah.
It's so fun. So it's what they need. And if they get overstimulated in the grocery store, I'm like, okay, let's take a moment, like let's do some deep breathing, or let's talk about something random. What do you need right now? Then we'll go home and we'll meal prep for the week, make sure they have their meals done. Or if they're wanting to get back to movement, maybe they had a really bad relationship with movement, and now they're like, what, I want to see it through a different light. I want to engage for the physical and the mental health benefits of this, and not for weight loss or whatever that behavior was. Maybe we do a walk and talk, so we're walking together and we're talking about what thoughts are coming up for you right now. How can we, get back to that intention of why we're doing this? There's so many cool things that we can do in session. And I think that's my favorite, is just getting to meet them where they are. They're like, hey, I'm really struggling with XYZ. And I'm like, oh, we can do that together. We can do a virtual kitchen session, or we can also just sit here and talk. If you want to talk about nutrition and you want to understand certain things, I love doing that too.
That's incredible. I think, I think maybe I don't want to speak for anyone else, but thinking of therapy and thinking of counseling and things like that, or seeing a dietitian, you think you're going to an office or you're maybe having an online session and you're talking about things in, you know, tangible way, but at the same time, it's in a it's in a situation where you're not applying it. So I love that you're taking not only the sessions or the information that you're giving, but then you're taking it out in the real world, because I think that's where the scariest part happens. You're like, okay, I can listen to you and I can agree with you. And I can think what you're telling me is something that I want to do in my life. But then when I leave you, how do I actually put that into practice? Then that's the scariest step, right? So you're actually still walking with them into the real world steps of applying what you're talking about. And that's amazing. And I'm sure that has a lot of good results because yeah, it's like you might be in their ear, but it's almost like you're with them in the store or you're with them in that challenging moment of crap. And what do I do? I don't know what I'm doing. And such a neat accountability there.
Yeah, it's huge. And that's my intention is I want it to be a realistic behavioral change. I want
Mhm.
it to be on your terms. I don't want me pushing you, but I'm going to be providing some support and accountability. I had this one client who they really needed to get groceries and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna do it after this session. And I was like, I was like, why don't we do it together? And they just looked at me and they said, I really need that accountability because, be honest, I wasn't going to do it after our session. I'm like, that's okay. We'll do it together. And we ended up ordering groceries, and they were like, I'm so thankful that like you held me accountable for that because honestly, I don't think I'm in a place to do it on my own. I'm like, I get that. We've been
Yeah.
there where we couldn't do it on our own. The eating disorder is sneaky. It loves to lie and say, oh, I'll do it later. So being able to do it in a non-judgmental but just a gentle, accountable way can be really, really helpful in those situations.
It is so sneaky to hear those lies will pop up at any given time. And even with the best of intentions, I mean, someone could end a session and think, okay, well, or you tell yourself, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then you don't, and there's excuses or there's all the reasons why. And then also, if you are um for you and for your clients, it's not helpful to come to that next session and say, you know what, I didn't do that. You know, um, that doesn't move anything forward or make progress. And progress doesn't always have to look linear or it doesn't always have to look huge. Every step can be tiny, but still just wanting to make sure that it's actually fruitful. So that's
So important. And you're absolutely right. Recovery is not linear. I always tell people that. I'm like, I wish we could meet and then your eating sort of magically heal itself the next day. But it's not linear because it depends on the things going on in our environments, depends on the season of life that we're in. Sometimes you might be doing really, really well in your recovery, and then maybe you hit a rock, and maybe barriers pop up, or maybe we did say that you were going to order those groceries and you didn't do it, and you show up to session, and you're like, hey, like it didn't happen. I just love telling clients, like, first off, client-clinician relationship, you're not here to please me. So don't think that you're going to come and I'm going to be mad at you. That's not my place. I'm here to help you. And second of all, we can learn from that. We can learn from when behaviors do come up, when maybe we act on the eating disorder. People will come and they'll say, Eden, XYZ happened, and it hasn't happened in so long. I'm like, you know what? Thank you so much for sharing that with me. And second of all, how do you feel about that? And they're most likely like, oh, in the moment it felt good. And the next day I was so upset about it. And I learned XYZ. I'm like, let's take what you learned, because we want to look at progress over perfection. We know perfection isn't real, but we know progress is, and we can learn so much. If they do a behavior and they're like, maybe they binge and they're like, in the moment, that felt great. Everything got quiet. It felt nice. It was a little rush for me. Then an hour later, everything was still there. Next day, still there. I was like, okay, well, what do you want to do differently next time? So kind of having that processing of when things come up can be so helpful and healing in the relationship too.
Yeah, that's a good tip of processing when something happens that you didn't want or plan or expect to happen. And on that note, I would love to hear what you would tell someone who is very hesitant to talk to a professional and they're at that space where they know they want to recover, they're in that mindset, but they're like, I'm afraid to talk to someone. What would you say?
I get that a lot. As a dietitian, you think food policing.
But
I get majority of my referrals, I would say, from therapists in the field, and therapists will call me and they're like, hey, I have a client and I've been trying to get them to call you for a few weeks or months now. And, we're still working on it. I'm like, why don't we do a call? All three of us can jump on a call if they're comfortable, or just the client and I can jump on a call, whatever that looks like, because most of the time they just don't know it. Just like we're talking about, it's the unknown. They're like, what if this person is mean? What if they're judgmental? What if they try to guilt and shame me? What if they put too much pressure on me? I hear that a lot.
Mm.
People come and I'll ask, where's your motivation for recovery, and how do you feel about this? And they'll say, I'm really motivated, but I'm so scared to fail. I'm like, I hear that, and we don't fail, we learn. We learn and we grow. So I feel like there's a lot of expectations that people might put on themselves, as well as, fear of the unknown. So those can be majority of the reasons I feel people are hesitant. And then once we get on the phone call, they're like, oh, you're a real person, like, I'm like, yeah.
Imagine that. Yeah.
Yep, I'm just a real person, I'm just here to help you. And having that, I do complimentary consultation calls, and I highly encourage people, look at the provider's website. Please learn from my story that it needs to be a provider who specializes in eating disorders. Make sure that they don't only say on their website, hey, I specialize in eating disorder. Okay, what's your background? Did you work at a higher level of care? What is your expertise? How do you work with eating disorders? If they say they work with eating disorders and weight loss, that means they don't work with eating disorders. The two do not coexist. So do your homework, make sure this provider is a good fit, and then always ask for a consultation call. Don't feel like just because you call someone that like it's an all or nothing, because it's not. You can call and say, oh, I just didn't feel like we were the best fit, and that's okay, and a provider who is a great provider is not going to take that personally, and they're going to understand that. So I always encourage people, write down your questions. If you have specific questions that you didn't find on the website, maybe you want to learn more about. I get random questions all the time, and I don't think twice about it. It's totally fine. I love when people have questions. So try to just do a discovery call, and try not to plan too much in the future, like, oh, well, I can't do this and that. Just try to get on the call and see where it goes from there.
One step at a time. Those are amazing tips for anyone who may need them right now. And on the flip side, what would you say to a friend or family member who has someone in their life struggling and they want to help, they're not sure how to help at this stage?
Yeah, it can be so challenging to be on the outside of an eating disorder. If you've personally had an eating disorder, you can relate, to the individual and see like, oh, I can see why XYZ is happening. But oftentimes I'll hear from family members or friends or just loved ones call and say, I don't know what's going on. This is happening. I have no idea why. I don't know how to help. I think I'm doing more harm than good. Um, and all of that's valid. All the confusion, all the feelings that they might be having, they're valid. And I encourage them to get some support too. Everyone is a part of this recovery journey. Everyone's going to look different, but it's impacting them as well. So also making sure that they have a support system, and then just being there for the person in recovery. There's so many things not to say to someone who is in
Yep.
recovery. I could talk
We
about
know.
that all
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
Hmm.
But just being there for them. Hey, how can I help you? And I
Hmm.
think too, working with that treatment team. Sometimes I'll have someone call, and if it's a younger client, it might be the parent or guardian reach out, and they might say, hey, is it okay if I'm on the consultation call? And I'm like, I'll ask the client directly, is that okay with you? And if they say yes, I'm like, absolutely. Then, we all three will get on the call. I also have loved ones join sessions. So if we're working on meal support and the loved one's like, I don't know what to do. They say they don't want to eat. I'm trying to be there for them. So I just say, okay, we won't eat. But I know that's not the answer. I'm like, yes, we do need.
You need to eat.
And it's so hard. They're
Hmm.
like, I don't know how to get them to eat. And it's like, that's fair. So I'll talk with the client, and we'll come up with like, what do we want the role to look like of our support system for this specific person? And then we'll talk about what we are comfortable having them involved in and what we're not. And then we'll invite that person into a session. Again, virtual is so great because no matter where everyone is, we can all join. And then we'll say, hey, this is what meal support can look like. What are your challenges, or what are you guys struggling with? How can we all work together as a team? And then we'll just continue to schedule them however necessary.
Okay. Well, I want to give you time to share any final thoughts or anything about your practice or any upcoming things that you have working on And we'll share a lot of this in the show notes too, all the links.
Yeah. And I just thought about this for your previous question of loved ones. On the website, so pearlwellnesspractice.com, you'll see a resource tab. And on there, it'll say for loved ones. And we actually have a bunch of stuff linked on there too. There are some like support groups that are ran for loved ones. There are some books for loved ones, so it can help them because it's overwhelming for everyone. So being able to have those resources could also be helpful.
That's great to know.
Absolutely. On the website, we try to provide a lot of different resources. So we have a resource tab. I also love writing. It's one of my favorite things. So I do a lot of blogging on there and encourage people to check it out. It talks about what does treatment look like? What are some of the symptoms of eating disorders? Do I need treatment? So there's a little something for everyone on there. And then we also put, podcasts that we're on, news segments that we participate in, any tool really that could be helpful towards individuals and their loved ones. And then for projects, we have been working on quite a few things that we're really excited about. So one of them being we created a 215-page body image workbook, and it feels like my baby. We have worked on this for over a year. So something we see so commonly with eating disorders is the body image that will come up. And then also I work with PCOS, so a lot of those individuals struggle with body image as well. So we ran a support group last year around body image. And we were like, oh, let's create this workbook, to go along with it. And then we kept adding and adding. We went over 200 pages and we were like, yes, like this is it. So we did a lot of thoughtful planning around it, lots of editing, just making sure that it was the best it could be. So that is on our website, and it can be a really powerful tool for just helping individuals understand body image. Why are these things coming up? How do we work through it? And how do we learn to just accept our bodies rather than fighting them for the rest of our lives? Because our bodies are our home, our bodies are our temples. So
Yeah. Well, and that's a whole other step from, recovery is, yeah, you have to there are ways and processes to recover from your eating disorder, and then it's possible your body could look different, or even it could even be, from a mental standpoint of just, it's hard to accept our bodies sometimes. And so having those resources to prepare for possibly even like a next stage. I know when I recovered from bulimia, that was its own big step, right? And then after that, it was, okay, I need to start working on body image. So
mhm.
I wasn't trying to do it all at once. I'm like, I just need to stop these behaviors, and I need to get to a point where I'm free from that. And then I need to focus on, you know, food freedom and body image, and all those things came through. And, we as humans, we'll have bad body image days in general anyway. I think that's
100%.
also normal. And even after you've recovered, it could still happen. The
Mhm.
enemy's still going to be in your head. Society is still going to be all in
Wow.
your face. And having tools and resources to combat that, and truth to tell yourself and rely on to build that reflex when you do have those days, that's so important.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on that. It's such a multi-layer approach. And
Mhm.
I think that's what's so intimidating about body image. People are like, I hate my body. How could I love it? I'm like, don't worry about loving it right now. Worry about being neutral about it. Let's just go there. Let's just be neutral about our bodies. Then when you're ready, maybe we can find a thing or two we don't hate about our body. So it's like peeling an onion. There's so many layers, there's so many approaches, and you're right, you're still going to have days you wake up and you're like, I'm not feeling it. And
Mhm.
what do we do with that? Do we act on behaviors and urges, or do we go through the CBT work? Do we find grounding techniques? Do we put on that safe or comfortable outfit or that color that complements our skin and makes us feel good? How are we going to go about that? It's so much more about how, we go about things. So I'm so glad you touched on that. And then along with the workbook, we actually created an e-course as well. So it
Nice.
is so neat. It's my therapist and I, and we deep dive into the workbook, but we go much further and we just talk about all the areas in the workbook. We declutter several environments, and then we help people replenish them. We help people clean out the closet for all seasons. feel more comfortable, bring in more pieces that might display confidence. And it's a really beautiful thing. So that the workbook and the e-course is something that we have been really excited about. So seeing it go live has been really cool. And then I'll like my phone will send me a notification. It's like, oh, you just got, an order. And I'm like, that is so incredible that I can be sitting here doing my dishes and there is someone that is healing their relationship with body image, like it's such a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And I'm so blessed that that opportunity is there to know that people are just healing. So that's been really cool. And then I did create another e-course specifically to PCOS.
Okay.
So this is something I'm really happy about. 60% of individuals who have PCOS will actually go on to develop eating disorder behaviors.
Wow.
Yes, it's so interesting how many people I see who come to me either for PCOS or come to me for eating disorder, and we find out that they coexist. So,
I had no idea.
yeah,
I mean, thinking about it now, it does make sense, but I had no idea that was the statistic and it's so high.
so high. It's alarmingly high. I'm like, why are we
Uh,
not talking about this enough?
yeah.
It's just it's very interesting. So I love working through PCOS in a weight neutral, gentle nutrition way and helping people say, hey, PCOS is lifelong, so let's not make it restrictive and realistic. Let's do true behavioral changes
Yeah.
and improve our PCOS so that whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, you can be able to live with PCOS and not allow it to just consume you. So that is a course I'm really excited about. And it just kind of walks through all the way from like what is PCOS to nutrition, movement, gut health, body image, all these areas.
That's a great thing to touch on too, because I don't know who's going to be listening to this, and maybe that's something that they struggle with too. So just knowing that there's a resource for that as well is great to share. So and it also makes your practice and your niche unique because that is, that's a specialty too. I imagine probably hard for people to find maybe a good fit for um doctor or someone who can help with that as well, PCOS. So,
Right. And if you're listening and you're like, I think I might have PCOS because it's highly undiagnosed. You can go to the website. I do have a complimentary quiz and it kind of will walk you through, do you have this or that? And it'll kind of explain the answer behind it.
okay.
Um, I have seen quite a few people who didn't know they had PCOS. They were, I was flagging for it. And I was like, why don't we go
Mhm.
get some testing done? And it did come back positive. So,
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's a good thing too. Yeah. If your body's just not feeling
mhm.
right, it's good to check in and see what that issue could be. For me, after I recovered, I realized I had my gut just didn't feel good.
Right.
And I ended up going to a doctor, getting blood work done, and found out I have well, I don't know that this is a scientifically accepted term, but leaky gut was something that
Yeah.
I had. And so, and just figuring out also that I have a dairy intolerance that I didn't know about, that not eating dairy makes me feel a lot better. And so, anyway, when you feel like something's not right with your body, yeah, it's a good idea to get some answers and
Yeah.
know how to
Get some.
make, how to feel better, whatever it is, whether
Yeah.
it's disordered eating or whether it's related to that or not, it's still important.
Yeah. We know our
Talk
bodies
about that too.
best. We know something is
Mhm.
up.
For sure. Yeah. Um, all right. Is there anything else you want to share about your website or anything that you are excited about that you want people to know?
Yeah, I do have a podcast called Grit into Worth, podcast by Pearl Wellness Practice. So if you are a podcaster and you're looking to just continue adding to that community, we would love to have you. We have some really cool episodes. We go over different types of treatment modalities. So we have like equine therapy, art therapy, all types of different things on here. And we just talk about nutrition and recovery and just hoping to add to the community. So feel free to join us over there. And, if you do want to work on healing that relationship with food, mind, body, and soul, I always do complimentary consultation calls. So you can connect with me through website would probably be best. And I would love to just connect with you.
Thank you, Eden. And I will link all of that in the show notes, your podcast, all the resources, your website, everything there. And I just love that you meet people where they're at. That's
Yeah.
such a neat thing, and I feel like unique to what a lot of people might find. And even being able to for people to reach out to you and work with you online is it's amazing. That's a beautiful thing about technology that we have to be able to do that. So if anyone's listening, you need someone, you're not sure who to reach out to, I would definitely encourage you to go to Eden's website, prowellness.com, and we will, or maybe it's prowellnesspractice.com, I don't
Yeah.
remember. But anyway, it'll be linked, so you'll get the right website. And I thank you so much for sharing your story today, sharing your passion, sharing why you do what you do, why you want to help women, why it matters. And I just really hope it touches anyone listening today who is seeking help in any of those areas.
Right. I'm so thankful to be here. Thank you for
Of
having
course.
me.
Yeah, no, it's been a wonderful conversation. Very God blessed. Hey, friend. I hope this conversation encouraged you today. And if it did, please let me know by rating and reviewing the Recover with God podcast wherever you are listening. Your feedback helps others find this podcast too. And click that follow button so you don't miss new episodes airing every Wednesday this season. Be sure to check out the show notes for all the links and additional resources we talked about today. And don't forget, whether you need help or you want to help, all help comes from God.